Our theme over the last few months is we've called Thus Have I Heard. We've called it that because we've been looking at some great Buddhist texts from we started out looking at some great Buddhist texts from what is called the Pali Canon, some of the earliest recorded teachings of the Buddha. And these records are passed down as an oral tradition for hundreds of years. So they tend to start with those words, thus have I heard, because somebody is telling what they heard. And since then we've moved on to look at some great important text teachings from a later school of Buddhism called the Mahayana, the great way or the great vehicle. And we've kept this title, Thus Have I Heard, because many of the Mahayana texts also start with that. But an alternative text for the series, title for the series might have been For the Welfare of the World. I think that somehow didn't ever get quite to our website. But For the Welfare of the World would be a very suitable title for talking about the Mahayana, the Great Way, because one of the most important aspects of the Mahayana is that it encourages to practice the Dharma, to grow, to develop, to nurture our full spiritual potential, to raise our consciousness to higher and higher levels, but not just for our own sake, but for the welfare of the world, for the benefit of all beings, to be of use, to help others to grow and develop as we grow and develop. So the ideal Buddhist from the Mahayana point of view is a being called a Bodhisattva. Whoops, we haven't got it here. Bodhisattva. Bodhi means awakening, sattva means being. And a Bodhisattva is a Buddhist practitioner who is seeking enlightenment, not just to vanish into a blissful nirvana and leave the rest of us to get on with it, but as part of a much bigger project, as part of a project of moving all of us moving towards enlightenment, part of the evolution of consciousness on this planet. And heaven knows our collective consciousness on this planet needs to evolve. If we look at the world. So the Bodhisattva seeks to develop themselves spiritually, but also to help others to develop spiritually as part of the evolution to higher and higher levels of consciousness. So they're not just seeking their own enlightenment, they're seeking us to help us all move towards enlightenment. And one of the most famous and influential Mahayana texts of this Mahayana school, which describes how an aspiring Bodhisattva should live and practice, is a long Sanskrit poem called the Bodhicharya Avatara, the guide to the path of awakening, if you like. Sometimes translated as the guide to the Bodhisattva's way of life. And we've talked a bit about this text already, but tonight Aryadasa and myself are going to explore one aspect, just one little aspect of what this text has to tell us about the path of the Bodhisattva, about the spiritual life, about what we need to bring into our spiritual life. So as you might know, the sevenfold puja, the devotional practice that we most practice here at this Buddhist Centre, is taken, the words of it are taken from the Bodhicharya Avatara. And in the Bodhicharya Avatara we hear the following lines: like the earth and the water, like the fire and the air, may I be a servant to beings on earth until the world is whole. So may I be a servant. That's the aspiration that Shantideva, the author of the Bodhicharya Avatara, is expressing. May I be a servant. And elsewhere in the text, he also speaks of his desire to serve, to give himself, to serve, to be a servant of the Buddhas and the high transcendental bodhisattvas, to be their servant, to serve Manjusri, the archetypal transcendental bodhisattva of wisdom, to serve Avalokiteshvara, the archetype of compassion. So it's that aspect of the path, the spiritual path, the bodhisattva path, but the whole spiritual path. It's that aspect of Buddhist practice, according to the Mahayana, that myself and Aryadasa are going to explore a bit more tonight. So our title for tonight is May I Be a Servant. May I be a servant. And we're going to explore why service is such an important part of any real spiritual life. I'm going to try and do it in a general way, and Aryadasa is going to talk more about that in his personal practice. So, why on earth would anyone aspire to be a servant? Okay? Surely to be a servant is a lowly position. Wouldn't we rather be the sort of people who have servants? No? Rather than being servants, I mean, wouldn't we like to be the sort of people who sort of big, strong people who go out and get what we want, and get our own way? Isn't that what we want? Isn't that what we want? And service is a very unfashionable concept. I mean, we're not supposed to do that at all, are we, really? We're not supposed to like service. Why on earth be a servant? Why should we wish to be a servant? Surely we should wish to be magnificent servants. Well, the trouble with these ideas about the wrongness and lowliness and undesirability of being a servant is that they ignore one important fact. And that important fact is that we all serve something. We are all servants. What we serve is whatever determines how we live our life, how we live day to day and how we live our life, what our life is about. That's what we serve. And many of us, I'm afraid, most of us, what we serve is our ego. It's our own egocentric wants. It's our own anxieties. It's our own moods. It's our desire for approval. It's our desire for financial security. It's the scripts about how life should be lived that we've inherited from our parents or from our schooling or our education, or that we've picked up from the advertising on the TV and radio, or whatever, TV and web. These are the things that for most of us determine the way we act, the way we live our lives. These are the things that we serve. And really, serving those things is not really that great, is it? I mean, it doesn't really make us very high on the scale of being, if that's what we serve. We all serve something, and what most of us serve is, frankly, quite trivial. Sorry. But the aspiring Bodhisattva seeks to serve something higher than their own ego. They seek to serve what is highest and most positive and most beautiful in the universe. And if we serve something higher, to be a servant of something higher and more worthwhile and more universal than our egos and our wants and our fears, in fact raises us. It raises us to a higher level. It makes us more worthy, it makes us more noble, it makes us a higher being. So to be a servant, in the sense that we are talking about, doesn't mean that we let go of our own selfish desires just to serve other people's selfish desires. It doesn't mean that. We serve something higher than the desires of any small individual. So it doesn't mean we become a doormat for others. It doesn't mean we can become a soft touch doing what other people want us to do, or doing what other people tell us to do. In fact, it makes us stronger. It makes us more of a true individual. To serve something higher than ourselves, yeah, it makes us stronger. To serve our desire for pleasure, for stuff, for approval, for status, all that makes us weak, in fact. It means that we are pushed one way or another by circumstances and other people. But when we serve something higher, we've got a steady compass, we've got a purpose in life, we've got something we steer by, a sense of direction, which allows us to rise above our passing moods, allows us to be independent, to be a real individual, allows us to not care what everybody thinks, even to be unpopular if that's what it takes, in order to stand up for what we believe in. In fact, what it does, to be a servant of something higher, allows us to be strong. To serve ourselves, ourself makes us weak. To serve something higher makes us strong. So, that's all very well. What is it? What is it that the aspiring Bodhisattva seeks to serve? So we've heard in Shantideva's words in the Bodhicharya Avatar, may I be a servant to beings on earth. So one thing that the Bodhisattva is seeking to serve is other beings, other people. And we also heard there's that aspiration to be a servant of the Buddhas and the transcendental Bodhisattvas, the high transcendental Bodhisattvas. And these two are interrelated because being a servant of beings and being a servant of the Buddhas and the high Bodhisattvas, they're two aspects of the same thing. Because ultimately, at the highest level, what the aspiring Bodhisattva seeks to serve is something. It's actually not a thing, but I'm limited by language here. Something called the bodhicitta. Bodhicitta. Bodhi means awakening, enlightenment. Chitta means mind, heart. So the awakened heart, the enlightened mind. The bodhicitta is an important concept in Mahayana Buddhism. It's not a concept, it's not a thing either, so I don't know what to call it. The bodhicitta is a whatever. Really important in Mahayana Buddhism. It's the spirit, the mind, the heart that manifests itself through a bodhisattva, through somebody who is seeking to practice for the benefit of all. At least it manifests through a bodhisattva to the extent that he or she has got their own little mind out of the way and allowed in this much greater, more universal mind, allowed this much greater, more universal mind to act through them, as it were, to allow themselves to be a vehicle for it. So the bodhicitta is not the mind or heart of any individual. Speaking poetically, it's something inherent in the universe. It's a stream of volition inherent in the universe, a transpersonal stream of volition seeking to move all beings towards higher and higher levels of consciousness, towards enlightenment. So the Buddhas and the high bodhisattvas are completely permeated by this bodhicitta. It's what they are, it's what acts through them. And they're dedicated to helping other beings, to help beings evolve towards enlightenment, to the ultimate benefit of beings. So to serve the bodhicitta is to serve the Buddhas, the bodhisattvas, and also to serve all beings. Well, serving the bodhicitta might seem like a very high-flown and abstract concept. So where am I going to see it? Where am I going to find the bodhicitta? How am I going to serve that? Hardly something we can bring into our daily practice, we might think. But in fact, it can be very down to earth. It can be very down to earth. As individual Buddhists living, in a particular time, in a particular place, there's very limited sort of lifespan that we have, and this very limited span of space that we inhabit. As individual time-bound Buddhists, we serve the bodhicitta by serving what is the positive forces in the universe as they manifest in our particular situations, in our particular lives. And if we're Buddhists, two of the ways that the bodhicitta, what's most positive in the universe, is most likely to manifest around us is as the Dharma and the Sangha. So we serve, there may be other ways, but for Buddhists, all Buddhists come across the Dharma and Sangha, so we serve the Dharma. We serve the Sangha. That is how we are servants. That is how we serve what is highest and most positive in the universe, because that's the way it manifests here and now for us. And in that way we serve the bodhicitta. In that way we are a servant. And for the Mahayana, that's just an important part, essential part of being a serious Buddhist. Excuse me, my notes are very confused because I reorganised this talk at a moment's notice. Okay, so a couple of caveats here. One caveat is that serving something higher, serving the bodhicitta, serving the Dharma and the Sangha, it doesn't just mean giving Dharma talks, okay? It doesn't just mean giving Dharma talks. It could mean all sorts of other things. It could actually mean serving other beings, serving other people. Now, I've said, it's not about putting our own egocentric desires to one side so that we can fulfill the egocentric desires of somebody else. But it may, in fact, manifest as this extremely challenging idea of actually helping, serving someone else. It's easy to think, I'll serve the bodhicitta, I'll serve the Dharma. To serve somebody else is slightly more challenging, actually. But there are several ways that may well be a part of our practice. For a start, we may choose, as a free individual, out of compassion, we may choose to serve, to help practically, in quite down-to-earth ways, people in need. Not because we have to, not because we must, but we may choose to do it as an act of compassion. Secondly, we may choose to serve, to engage in beneficial activity in relation to other members of the Sangha, other people in the Sangha. And one of the reasons we might do that is because creating Sangha, nurturing Sangha, is part of the way that an aspiring bodhicitta, aspiring bodhisattva, seeks to help other beings. We completely depend on having a Sangha around us for our development. We cannot develop individually. So the more we move up jointly, the more we ourselves have a chance of growing. So serving the Sangha, creating the Sangha, is part of our practice. And part of the way we create the Sangha is by mutual beneficial activity. Beneficial activity creates metta. Metta is the cement that creates the Sangha. So we serve other members of the Sangha. There's a mutual spirit of service within the Sangha. And thirdly, we may actually choose to serve another individual who is themselves a servant of the Dharma and Sangha. We may choose to do that in quite down-to-earth ways because maybe that person has more experience than us. Maybe they have skills that we don't have. Maybe they have a greater vision than us. And we may choose to serve them so that they can be more effective. And that's our way of serving the Dharma and the Sangha. So in all those three ways, and in others that I can think of, this spirit of service could well manifest in terms of just serving in quite ordinary ways other people, doing the washing up, whatever. And of course, it could manifest in quite ordinary ways around the Buddhist Centre, around whatever Sangha situation that we have in any sort of way. So that's one thing. It doesn't preclude serving in quite ordinary, down-to-earth ways. And also, I should make clear, it doesn't mean we forget about our personal practice. It's not that we sort of become this busy person who's always sort of serving, and completely forget about meditation, solitude, study, etc. We are serving what's highest in the universe, and that includes what's highest in ourselves. So we need to nurture what's highest in ourselves to be of use outside. So to serve something higher, to be a servant of something higher, raises us up, raises up our level of being, makes us an individual rather than somebody who's just blown around by moods, circumstances, other people. And above all, it erodes our sense of being a completely separate self. It makes us part of something bigger than ourselves. It humbles our ego, but it dignifies us. And it's not something new. It's not something that the Mahayana, as it were, invented. This idea crops up in the Bodhisattva. But there's a much earlier sutta from the earliest phases of Buddhism called the Gaurava Sutta, in which the Buddha shortly after his enlightenment reflects a person is unhappy if they have nothing higher than themselves to serve. And he thinks, well, but what can I serve? Because there's nobody who I see as more spiritually developed than myself. I will serve the Dharma. So so the Buddha saw himself as a servant. And we, as followers of the Buddha, we should see ourselves as servants as well. And that can manifest, as I say, in quite down-to-earth ways. It can manifest, it's moving our practice beyond it just being about me to it being about us. So it can manifest in quite down-to-earth ways. But we need to see that spirit of service as part of our practice and bring it in more and more. It's actually a very high aspiration to be completely a servant. It's probably an aspiration which is beyond us. We've still got quite a lot of ego going on, but at least we can move our practice a bit in that direction. And now Aryadasa, whose name, by coincidence, means servant of what is holy and noble, is going to tell us a bit about how he does that in his practice.
Okay, can you hear me? So I'm going to talk more personally about my evolving relationship to service and the myth of service and how it inspires me. So as Vadanya said, my name has service in it, so Dasa means servant. And Arya is translated as noble or holy. So in this context, there are two aspects that make something noble. So the first aspect is about skillful action, so kusala karma. So volitional action that's born out of contentment, metta, solidarity, wisdom. So that's the first aspect of what's noble. The second aspect is means basically beyond the world. So lakutara means beyond the world, so something transcendental, something nirvanic. So these two aspects of nobility. So he who serves that which is noble, he who serves that which is noble, Aryadasa. So Vadanya is my private preceptor, so he gave me this name. And so I got this name when I was at Gukaloka, when I was joining the order. So Gukaloka is a retreat centre in Spain where I was ordained. And I was there for quite a long time. I was there for 4 months. And I was there for a little bit of time before I was ordained and got my name. And I was wondering what my name might be, what Vadanya might choose for my name. So I had a few loose thoughts about it. So one that came to mind was lion-like conqueror, so Singha. So that sounded quite good. Another one is Mahapurush, which I'm told means something like the big chief, the big man. So these were the names that are going through my head semi-seriously. So I was drawn by strong names, and these names that I came up with would have definitely been wrong for me. So as I got closer to my ordination, my mind turned towards the past, all the events that had led me to that point. So I was kind of on the edge of making the most important commitment that I was ever going to make. And my mind turned to the particular path that I took, especially since meeting the Dharma. So first coming to introductory classes here in Sheffield. So I was in my final year of university. So I came to the introductory classes. I started coming to Sangha night, mitra study, morning meditations, volunteering and eventually working at Evolution. I taught Lama Rinzin some English, which led me to teach other students some English and maths for their GCSEs. I volunteered for other projects, like the National Trust. I volunteered and then eventually worked for the schools project here. I got involved with the Sub-35 group. So all the ups and downs, inspired moments, complete failures, I was kind of going through these as I was drawing towards my ordination. And what tied all these together was service. So Vadanya really did name me perfectly. So if I could put a name to these reflections, it would have been service. So my path really was about finding out what I thought was noble, what I thought was holy, and working out how I could serve it. So yeah, and Vadanya mentioned, we hadn't talked about this before, but service brings me strength. So it was the strongest name I could have asked for. So much better than Mahapurush, the big chief. And so, yeah, some reflections on service, some personal reflections on service. So this is a personal talk. I find it important to ask myself questions when I'm reflecting. And questions that I don't necessarily expect to get a direct answer to, but I sort of leave them hanging around in my mind for a bit, and it sort of helps crystallise my thinking, at least for the short term. So there are 3 questions that I've asked myself, and about my personal relationship to service. And then, what does service mean to me? Why do I think it's important? I do think it's important in the spiritual life, but why do I think that? And looking forward, how do I express it more fully, more effectively? So service means to me putting my life into something. That's what service means to me. And there are 2 aspects to this. So a kind of external world of where I put my time and energy, and an internal world of what I place value and meaning on. So what my mind occupies itself with. So these are the kind of 2 aspects of service for me. So it's related to generosity service, but I like the word better because it makes explicit the kind of selfless nature of true generosity. So it brings out the wisdom aspect. To act without self-reference, and it's freely given. So service is freely given. It's given from a place of abundance. So really important. And I found a quote by Walt Whitman, which is really good. So, behold, I do not give lectures or a little charity. When I give myself. So this is what service means to me. This is what service feels like. And the people that I look up to the most, and in my mind seem the most happy and the most weighty and have helped the most people, are those that have devoted their life to something. So my name is definitely an aspiration for me. So I definitely aspire to be a servant to that which is holy. And I feel very conscious of the fact that I haven't been around long enough to be a true servant yet. So I'm like a servant in training. So service is measured in decades, in a lifetime, not in years. And it happens not just in comfort and convenience, I think that's as important as well, but in times of challenge and controversy as well. So in these times, it's especially important to keep on serving what I think is valuable, what one think is valuable. So in a very kind of real sense, it sounds a bit dramatic, but in a very real sense, if at the end of my life I've lived up to some extent to my name, I will be really happy. I'll have no regrets. So why I think that service is important in the spiritual life. So there's four things, or this time there's 4 things. Because it expresses reverence, it acts as a protection against my own selfishness, my own conceit, and it has helped me resolve internal psychological conflicts, internal conflicts. Very importantly, it brings joy, it brings happiness, that's my experience, and it helps other people, probably the most important. So service is important because it expresses reverence. It's felt like wanting to serve this volition of service It's felt like a natural expression of reverence and gratitude that comes from my heartfelt response to enlightenment when I'm in contact with it. So living principle in the universe, I kind of, mine other people's potential for it, our ultimate potential. So the more I'm in touch with whatever it is, enlightenment, the more reverence and gratitude I experience, the more I want to serve it. And so over the years, the conviction has grown in me that I think the three jewels, the Buddha, the Dharma, the Arya Sangha, is what's really worth reverencing and therefore what's really worth serving. And I went through a process of this actually of basically deciding what I thought was noble, what I thought was holy, what I thought was worth revering, and therefore what I thought was worth serving. It felt very important to do that. So I asked myself this question a lot over the 4 months while I was at Kukiloka, while I was on retreat. I was asking myself the question, what am I doing with my life? What am I doing with my life? What's most important to me? What's most valuable to me? What's the most beneficial thing I can do? Just asking myself and really trying to let anything come up. Memory came to me of listening to a famous politician, I won't say who it is, outside City Hall in Sheffield, and he was talking very movingly and passionately about social reform. And I really welled up in this crowd of people listening to him. And I just thought, well, why not serve that? So why not serve, why not put my whole life into politics? Why not do that? So it's important to know why I'm not doing that, or why I've chosen not to do that. So I have a huge admiration for all the incredible things that people do that I think are so important like this. And service isn't exclusive. You can do many things. You can serve many things. But in the end, I came to the conclusion that because I'm a mortal person, I'm mortal, and I suffer in all sorts of different ways, and I'm surrounded by mortal people who suffer in all sorts of different ways. What I feel is really worth serving is the vision, principles, practices of Buddhism, because I think they help to lead to the end of suffering in all sorts of different ways. So lead to absolute bliss, happiness, freedom. And in that beyond the world aspect, that kind of transcendental, Lokuttara aspect, they open the doors to the deathless. So the Buddha said soon after his enlightenment, which I really like, in a world where blindness reigns, I shall beat the deathless drum. And open are the doors to the deathless, let those with ears show their faith. So the deathless isn't a thing or a place, it's indefinable. So this is a kind of poetry of ultimate potential that really inspires me. And I thought that's, in the end, I think that is what I want to serve. And as much as I can, I try and keep sight of Buddhism at that most radical level, the Dharma at that most radical level. So on a down-to-earth, practical level, this has worked out for me as being extremely grateful to Sangha Ratchathana's presentation and particular emphasis of the Dharma life, such as friendship, the arts, increasing my capacity for beauty and appreciation, and just looking out for ways to contribute to the Sheffield Sangha. So trying to go to things, Sangha events, retreats. So turning up for things and being part of the Sangha is definitely a service. So Mitra study, work days, festivals, etc., etc. So it's really important that that I try and turn up to things. Basically, we try and turn up to things. It's a service to the Sangha. And as much as I can, I've tried to understand and apply the Dharma in my own life and how I can express it, and particularly to children in the schools project that I do. And trying to embody the Dharma as much as I can, particularly in ethical behaviour. So trying to exemplify it to others without necessarily saying a word, really, talking about Buddhism explicitly. Balancing periods of withdrawal and engagement to try and keep myself fresh and with some kind of idealism burning. And renouncing unskillful habits and a kind of heavy lifestyle so I can free up as much of myself as possible, while trying to be realistic at the same time. So I've involved myself. This has worked out as just trying to involve myself in various different projects that I've already mentioned and trying to serve the three jewels with the Sangha. And service, I have found, protects me from my own selfishness. So I was given some very important advice on my ordination retreat that I've probably heard before, but I took it a bit deeper this time. It went in a bit deeper. And you can quite easily take the Buddha's teachings and use them to become more self-obsessed, which is in fact the opposite of what you're trying to do, but it can be done, easily done. So what you're trying to do is move from a selfish to selfless mode of being. So the advice that I got, which really helped me, was don't make yourself into your own hobby. So don't become obsessed with yourself and your own mind and your own dream diary and etc., etc. So all these things are good in their place, but don't become obsessed with them. I found serving something is an extremely good way of highlighting my own obsession, because I've served with other people, and when you serve with other people, you go against preferences sooner or later. So I've had to come up against my own preferences. So service is a karmic volition that helps me overcome the things that I don't want to do. And just a really small example of something last week was that I said that I'd flyer for the next intro course. So take flyers out to different shops and ask if I could leave the flyers there so people knew what was going on at the Buddhist Centre. And I myself received a flyer, which is why I knew where the Buddhist Centre was all those years ago. And despite all my idealism, I really just didn't want to do it. I didn't want to go into a shop and say, "Can I leave some flyers here?" But I did it mostly I did it. So there's something about overcoming preferences in that small example, because I thought it's really important to serve the intro course in whatever way I can. I can't commit to the Wednesday nights, but I can commit to that kind of, I don't know what it is, like social embarrassment of asking to leave flyers there. So sometimes I'm riddled with big or small resistances to almost everything apart from staying in bed. But service really does take me out of my preferences and opinions, likes and dislikes. Taking my feelings too seriously is a disaster. Yeah, I've really found that out. And one of my greatest sources of happiness is not taking my feelings too seriously. So service protects against conceit. So conceit, so that I'm better, I am worse, or I am the same as other people. So conceit. So particularly with the schools project that I'm involved with, is working with the Sangha under a bit of intensity, a bit of pressure, and sometimes I fail completely, and it's humiliating and humbling. Sometimes I surprise myself with my own skillfulness, and I think, I come up with something I didn't think I was capable of. So, I think I'm not that terrible either. And service with, and also that I'm not equal to other people either. So it's really demonstrated to me doing projects, being involved with the Sangha, is that each of us has a particular, somethingness that they bring to a situation. And I'm going to kind of break my own rule and talk about a dream that I had, so bear with me. So it was a dream that I had at Gukaloka. I will make it quick. So it was this dream that I had this toolbox. I was looking at this toolbox, and it was one of these toolboxes with, the indentations of where the tools go. So there's a hammer-shaped indentation where the hammer goes, and a spanner-shaped indentation where the spanner goes. And I had this toolbox, and it's quite big, and it was only partly full. And what I realised was, in the dream, I didn't need a full tool set, because other people would have those tools that I didn't have. And all that I needed to do was work on the tools that I did have and maybe get some more. I might never get a complete set, but that didn't matter. And there were tools of all sorts of various shapes and sizes that I didn't even know what they were for, but they'd be useful at some point. But I didn't know what they could be used for at that time. So I woke up and I had a most profound sense of peacefulness. And it really highlighted to me that I just need to do the best with what I have, and other people will fill in the rest. We just need to do all the best with what we've got. So we need all these different tools, temperaments and experiences that one person just can't have. So serving together, so we're not the same either. We don't have the same tools either. So that's basically a crude Western image of the 1,000-armed Avalokiteshvara. It's a service that helps resolve internal psychological conflict. I won't say much about this, but I feel like it's worth saying something that I found that serving something greater than myself, more important than me, has helped resolve personal conflicts on a higher level, much more than self-introspection can. So at one point in my life, for various different reasons, I had loads of internal psychological conflict and tension. And self-analysis just made it worse. And I was tying myself in knots with my own mind. And what resolved it was other people. So realising that it wasn't about me and working with other people for something else. So basically on a very normal level, noticing other people, that they existed, that's important. And then just being kind to them. And the penny really dropped in the introductory course with the gratitude exercise. So that's where you think about all the people that you're grateful for. This is a real moment of clarity for me that, life's about other people, that's what life's about. And lastly, and probably the most important, I found serving something really, really joyful. It makes me feel really, really happy, and it helps people. So that's why I think it's important. And to finish, how do I express it more and more effectively? So I think the conclusion that I've come to at the moment is it's just about letting go more and more of my self-imposed limitations about who I think I am, what I think I can do, what I can't do. And if I can keep doing that, loosening that sense of myself as I am now, and just keep asking the questions, how can I serve? I can see that I'll become a better and better servant. So service is really a path of wisdom. So it's an approach to wisdom that makes the most sense to me. So this expansion of self, becoming selfless. So it's an approach to wisdom for me. So I'll finish with a quote from Subhuti. So it's from his the Super Personal Force, the paper, the Super Personal Force, that he wrote with Sangha. So when people come together who deeply share a common vision and purpose, their efforts combine in a momentum that draws them onward beyond themselves. This is the Sangha. If they are able to join in real harmony with openness and trust, then the weaknesses of each are obviated and their strengths contributed selflessly to their shared Dharma service. Between them, they set up a powerful current by which they are all simultaneously carried along. Thank you.